a termination clause. But I am clear, from what I have heard in this place and from my own conversations, that these elements do not offer a sufficient number of colleagues the reassurance that they need. I spoke to a number of EU leaders over the weekend, and in advance of the European Council, I will go to see my counterparts in other member states and the leadership of the Council and the Commission. I will discuss with them the clear concerns that this House has expressed. We are also looking closely at new ways of empowering the House of Commons to ensure that any provision for a backstop has democratic legitimacy and to enable the House to place its own obligations on the government, to ensure that the backstop cannot be in place indefinitely. Mr. Speaker, having spent the best part of 2 years poring over the detail of Brexit, listening to the public's ambitions and, yes, their fears too, and testing the limits of what the other side is prepared to accept, I'm in absolutely no doubt that this deal is the right one. It honours the result of the referendum.
Order. The remainder of the statement must be heard, and I invite the House to hear it with courtesy, and for the avoidance of doubt and also the benefit of those attending to our proceedings who are not members of the House, I emphasise that, as per usual, I will call everyone who wants to question the Prime Minister. But meanwhile, please hear her. The Prime Minister.
It honours the result of the referendum, it protects jobs, security and our union, but it also represents the very best deal that is actually negotiable with the EU. I believe in it, as do many members of this House, and I still believe there is a majority to be won in this House in support of it if I can secure additional reassurance on the question of the backstop, and that is what my focus will be in the days ahead. But, Mr. Speaker, if you take a step back, it is clear that this House faces a much more fundamental question. Does this House want to deliver Brexit? And a clear message from the SNP, but if the House does it want to do so through reaching an agreement with the EU? If the answer is yes, and I believe that is the answer of the majority of this House, then we all have to ask ourselves whether we're prepared to make a compromise, because there will be no enduring and successful Brexit without some compromise on both sides of the debate. Many of the most controversial aspects of this deal, including the backstop, are simply inescapable facts of having a negotiated Brexit. Those members who continue to disagree need to shoulder the responsibility of advocating an alternative solution that can be delivered, and do so without ducking its implications. So if you want a second referendum to overturn the result of the first, be honest that this risks dividing the country again. Be honest that this risks dividing the country again, when as a House we should be striving to bring it back together. If you want to remain part of the single market and the customs union, be open that this would require free movement, rule-taking across the economy, and ongoing financial contributions, none of which are, in my view, compatible with the result of the referendum. If you want to leave without a deal, be upfront that in the short term this would cause significant economic damage to parts of our country who can least afford to bear the burden. I do not believe that any of those courses of action command a majority in this House. But notwithstanding that fact, for as long as we fail to agree a deal, the risk of an accidental no deal increases. So the government will step up its work in preparation for that potential outcome, and the Cabinet will hold further discussions on it this week. The vast majority of us, Mr. Speaker, accept the result of the referendum and want to leave with a deal. We have a responsibility to discharge. If we will the ends, we must also will the means. And I know that members across the House appreciate how important that responsibility is. And I'm very grateful to all members on this side of the House, and a few on the other side too, who've backed this deal and spoken up for it. Many others I know have been wrestling with their consciences, particularly over the question of the backstop, seized of the need to face up to the challenge posed by the Irish border, but genuinely concerned about the consequences. I have listened, I have heard those concerns, and I will now do everything I possibly can to secure further assurances. If I may conclude, Mr. Speaker, on a personal note, on the morning after the referendum 2.5 years ago, I knew that we had witnessed a defining moment for our democracy. Places that didn't get a lot of attention at elections and which did not get much coverage on the news were making their voices heard and saying that they wanted things to change. I knew in that moment that Parliament had to deliver for them. But of course, that doesn't just mean delivering Brexit. It means working across all areas, building a stronger economy, improving public services, tackling social injustices, to make this a country that truly works for everyone.
The Prime Minister must be heard. The Prime Minister.
Tackling social injustices, to make this a country that truly works for everyone, a country where nowhere and nobody is left behind. And these matters are too important to be afterthoughts in our politics. They deserve to be at the centre of our thinking. But that can only happen if we get Brexit done and get it done right. And even though I voted Remain, from the moment I took up the responsibility of being Prime Minister of this great country, I've known that my duty is to honour the result of that vote. And I've been just as determined to protect the jobs that put food on the tables of working families and the security partnerships that keep each one of us safe. And that's what this deal does. It gives us control of our borders, our money and our laws. It protects jobs, security and our union. It is the right deal for Britain. I am determined to do all I can to secure the reassurances this House requires, to get this deal over the line and deliver for the British people. And I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for a copy of the statement before we met here this afternoon. We're in an extremely serious and unprecedented situation. The government has lost control of events and is in complete disarray. It's been evident for weeks that the Prime Minister's deal did not have the confidence of this House. Yet she ploughed on regardless, reiterating, "This is the only deal available." Can she be clear with the House? Is she seeking changes to the deal or mere reassurances? Does she therefore accept the statement from the European Commission at lunchtime saying that it was the only deal possible, we will not renegotiate, our position has not changed? Ireland's Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, has said it is not possible to renegotiate the Irish border backstop, stating that it was the Prime Minister's own red lines that made the backstop necessary. Exactly. So can the Prime Minister be clear? Is she now ready to drop further red lines in order to make progress? Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister confirm that the deal presented to this House is not off the table, but will be represented with a few assurances? Bringing back the same botched deal either next week or in January, and can she be clear on the timing, will not change its fundamental flaws and deeply held objections right across this House, which go far wider than the backstop alone. Mr. Speaker, this is a bad deal for Britain, a bad deal for our economy and a bad deal for our democracy. Our country deserves better than this. The The deal damages our economy, and it isn't just the opposition saying that. The government's own analysis shows this deal would make us worse off. Yeah. If the Prime Minister cannot be clear that she can and will renegotiate a deal, then she must make way. Yes. And if she is, Mr. Speaker, if she is going back to Brussels, then she needs to build a consensus in this House. Yeah. And since it appears business has changed for the next 2 days, then it seems not only possible but necessary that this House debates the negotiating mandate that the Prime Minister takes to Brussels. Exactly. There is no point at all in this Prime Minister bringing back the same deal again, which clearly does not support is not supported by this House. Yep. Mr. Speaker, we've endured 2 years of shambolic negotiations. Yes. Red lines which have been boldly announced, then cast aside. Yep. We're now on our third Brexit secretary, and it appears each one of them has been excluded from these vital negotiations. We were promised a precise and substantive document and got a vague 26-page wish list, and they become the first government ever in British history to be held in contempt of Parliament. The government is in disarray. Uncertainty is building for business. People are in despair at the state of these failed negotiations and concerned about what it means about their jobs, their livelihood and their communities. And the fault for that lies solely at the door of this shambolic government. The Prime Minister is trying to buy herself one last chance to save this deal. If she doesn't take on board the fundamental changes required, then she must make way for those who can.
I hope I can respond fairly briefly to the Right Honourable Gentleman. The Right Honourable Gentleman appeared to argue, on one hand, that it wasn't possible to change the deal because the EU had said this was the only deal, and on the other hand, that the only thing he would accept was the deal being renegotiated. No, the Right Honourable Gentleman quoted the European Union as saying this was the only deal, and then goes on to say that the whole deal needs to be renegotiated. This is the fundamental question that members of this House have to ask themselves is whether they wish to deliver Brexit and honour the result of the referendum. If you wish to all the analysis shows that if you wish to deliver Brexit, if you wish to honour the result of the referendum, then the deal that does that, that best protects jobs and our economy, is the deal that is on the government has put forward. That
everybody will have his or her chance, but the questions have been put and the answers must similarly be heard. The Prime Minister.
That is the fundamental question for members of this House. To deliver on and honour the result of the referendum, but to do it in a way that protects jobs and our economy, and that is what this deal does. The Right Honourable Gentleman talks about a number of issues. He wants to be in the customs union such that free movement would have to, and the single market and free movement would have to be accepted. He refuses to accept that any deal requires a backstop, because that's our commitment to the people of Northern Ireland. He claims he wants to negotiate trade deals, yet wants to be in the customs union, fully in the customs union, that will not enable us to negotiate those trade deals. And finally, he says about the uncertainty, for British business. I can tell the Right Honourable Gentleman that the biggest uncertainty for British business lies not in this deal, but on the front bench of the Labour Party.
Order. Before I look to the Father of the House and then other colleagues, I want to say the following. Although the government's intention to halt this debate at this inordinately late stage has been widely leaked to the media in advance, I felt it only appropriate to hear what is proposed before advising the House. Halting the debate after no fewer than 164 colleagues have taken the trouble to contribute, will be thought by many members of this House to be deeply discourteous. Indeed, in the hours since news of this intention emerged, many colleagues from across the House have registered that view to me in the most forceful terms. Having taken the best procedural advice, colleagues should be informed that there are two ways of doing this. The first, and in democratic terms, the infinitely preferable way, is for a minister to move at the outset of the debate that the debate be adjourned. This will give the House the opportunity to express its view in a vote whether or not it wishes the debate to be brought to a premature and inconclusive end. I can reassure ministers that I would be happy to accept such a motion so that the House can decide. The alternative is for the government unilaterally to decline to move today's business, which means that the House is not only deprived of its opportunity to vote upon the substance of the debate tomorrow, but also that it is given no chance to express its view today on whether the debate should or should not be allowed to continue. I politely suggest that in any courteous, respectful and mature environment, allowing the House to have a say, its say, on this matter would be the right and, dare I say it, the obvious course to take. Let us see if those who have assured this House and the public over and over and over again that this supremely important vote is going to take place tomorrow without fail, wish to rise to the occasion. Mr. Kenneth Clark.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of Europe, this House is not just divided into parties, it's divided into factions. And it becomes clear that at the moment there is no predictable majority for any single course of action going forward. Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree that no other governments are going to start negotiations with us on any new arrangement, whilst the British continue to explore what exactly it is they can get a parliamentary majority to agree to? Furthermore, we are strictly bound, quite rightly, to the Good Friday Agreement and the issue of a permanently open border in Ireland. So does she agree that it's particularly folly for a large faction in this House to continue for an argument that we should insist to the other governments that the British will have a unilateral right to declare an end to that open border at a time of their choosing, which is why the backstop remains inevitable?
Can I say to my right honourable and learned friend that I certainly agree. I think none of the alternative arrangements that have been floated and suggested in this House actually would command a majority of this House. But he's also right that we retain our absolute commitment to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and to the commitments with it that the United Kingdom government made within that agreement. And any agreement which was being negotiated with the European Union, be that either of the other two options that are normally quoted, the Norway option of some form or the Canada option of some form, would require negotiation, could risk the possibility of there being a period of time when that relationship was not in place, and therefore would indeed require a backstop.
Kirsty Blackman.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of the statement, and thank you, Mr Speaker, for the benefit of your words in relation to how this could proceed. The events of the past few hours have highlighted that this is a government in a total state of collapse. The Prime Minister has been forced to pull tomorrow's vote in a stunning display of pathetic cowardice. The vote tomorrow night would have shown the will of this House, but this government is focused on saving the Prime Minister's job and her party, instead of doing what is right for these countries. She is abdicating her responsibility. Her deal will make people poorer. It will lead to years of further uncertainty and difficult negotiation, with no guarantee that a trade deal can even be struck. It does not have the support of her backbenches. Indeed, no support from the majority of benches across this place. No support from the Scottish Parliament. And no support from the Welsh Assembly. Why has it taken the Prime Minister this long to face up to reality? Her deal was dead in the water long before this morning. Last week, it was this deal or no deal. She now needs to be clear with this House about what has changed. Mr Speaker, Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU. But yet again, our views are being ignored, as they have been throughout this disastrous and incompetent Brexit process. Back in 2014, Scotland was promised the strength and security of the UK, but the reality has been Westminster collapse and chaos. We were promised an equal partnership, but we've been treated with contempt. Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of her own benches, and she's failed to convince this House of her plan for exiting the EU. We simply cannot go on like this. It's clear that the Prime Minister is incapable of taking decisions about the future, and that Downing Street cannot negotiate anymore, either with the EU or with the Tory backbenches. What she is really scared of is allowing this House to determine the way forward, and allowing the public the opportunity to remain in the EU. She knows she's lost, but she's still wasting precious time. Mr Speaker, we need the Prime Minister to be clear about when the House will vote on this deal. This government and the Prime Minister have failed. It's time they got out of the way. Prime Minister, members across this House don't want your deal. The EU don't want to renegotiate. Isn't the only way to break this deadlock to put it to the people?
The honourable lady asked what I have been doing. Actually, what I have been doing is listening to members of this House who have identified a very specific concern with the deal as it with the deal that was negotiated. As I said, we had negotiated within that deal a number of aspects to address the issue around the permanence or otherwise of the backstop. Those I had hoped would actually give sufficient confidence to members of this House. It has proved in discussions that they have not, and therefore we are going to work to get those further reassurances that I want to ensure with other members of the House. If the Shadow Foreign Secretary would just have a little patience. The date of the vote was one of the questions that was asked by the Scottish Nationalist Party, and I'm going to come to address that matter. The responsibility of this government is to deliver on the result of the referendum and do so in a way that is good for the whole of the United Kingdom, and that is what this deal does. I will be going, we are deferring the vote, and I will be going to seek those assurances. Obviously, there is two parties in relation to this, the United Kingdom and the EU, so we will be holding those discussions. Members will know that there is in legislation, there is the issue of the 21st of January date, which is in legislation in this. The Shadow Foreign Secretary shouts 21st of January as if it's the first time she's heard of it. I suspect she actually voted for it when it went through this House, but there we are. I don't. But the key point of the honourable lady's remarks was that this should go back to another vote of the public. I have said, and she will not hear me say anything different from what I've said previously. I believe it is important. It is important to honour the result of the referendum. I believe it is a matter of the duty of members of this House to honour that referendum result, and I believe also it is a matter of faith in politicians, that those many people, those many people who, for the first time ever, or for many decades, went out and voted for leaving the European Union, that they are able to have the confidence that the politicians in this House delivered for them.
Mr. Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to focus my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, on the issue of the backstop, as this is critical to whatever my right honourable friend conducts with the European Union. Does she not agree with me that now that she has essentially suspended the remaining part of this debate, that it is incumbent on her and the government to go forward boldly to the EU and remind them that they have already said that no matter what arrangements would be in place, there would be no hard border on the border of Ireland, and so have the Irish. So given that, would she now commit to going back to them to say they need to reopen the withdrawal agreement and insert into the withdrawal agreement a commitment to open borders and take out those restrictions that would take away the power and control from this Parliament to decide its future?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend, two things. He's right that the European Union have been clear, as we have, about ensuring there's no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Actually, the European Union have also been clear, as they are in the withdrawal agreement, about the temporary nature of the backstop. So I think he's right. We should go boldly back to the European Union on these issues. We have been rigorously and robustly debating with them on this and achieved a number of changes to the withdrawal agreement in order to ensure that there could be that reassurance of the temporary nature of the backstop. But it is now for me and for this government to go back to Europe and to make the point that those assurances have not been sufficient for members of this House. Nothing should be off the table, but everybody should be very clear that there are, in calling for a reopening of the withdrawal agreement, that there are issues that would then be put back on the table, including the Northern Ireland-only customs territory.
Sir Vincent Cable.
The fiasco today, the government has really lost all authority. And let me just say that I and my colleagues will fully support the Leader of the Opposition if he now proceeds to a no-confidence vote, as duty surely calls. But specifically on the statement, can I ask the Prime Minister how many of the heads of government that she telephoned over the weekend have indicated that they would consider the Irish backstop dispensable?
Well, the discussions we've consistently had, and as I have indicated in my references to other arrangements, are that there should be a backstop to ensure that there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The concern that has been raised predominantly by colleagues is the question of the permanence or otherwise of that backstop, to ensure that it can be brought to an end, to ensure that it will not continue indefinitely. I will be going back to, and the number of European leaders I've spoken to have indicated that they are open to discussions to find a way to provide reassurance to members of this House on that point.
Sir William Cash.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows that the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration both cover many, many legal issues beyond the backstop, important and vital as that is. These include, for example, the European Court, control over our own laws, questions relating to compatibility with the Withdrawal Act of 2018. Under the Ministerial Code, there is an absolute obligation to consult the Attorney-General formally and in good time before committing to critical decisions which involve legal considerations. The government, under the order of the House, I think it's to the 4th of December, must publish his advice in full on both the withdrawal agreement and the framework. We have seen that so far the only advice that's been published is with regard to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Did the Prime Minister seek the Attorney-General's advice under the Code on both these matters in good time or not? And if she did seek his advice, why has that advice not been published?
To my honourable friend, he has been asking me variations of this question in, I think, each of the statements that I've done recently, and I am very clear that the government undertakes its responsibilities in relation to the seeking of legal advice entirely, properly and appropriately, and of course the government published a full legal position on the withdrawal agreement, a position in more detail than I think governments have previously published on any such occasion or in any similar event. And not only that, but the Attorney-General, of course, came to this House, made a statement and took many questions from members on these issues.
Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Speaker, frankly, what the Prime Minister says today simply isn't credible, is it? I mean, this is an impossible position for the government to find itself in. The Prime Minister says she's listening, but she talks about reassurances and assurances. Does she not get it by now that the withdrawal agreement, legally binding text, is unacceptable to this House? And she cannot pretend going on defending the deal when she knows that if the vote had taken tomorrow, it would have been overwhelmingly defeated. So please, Prime Minister, really do start listening and come back with changes to the withdrawal agreement, or it will be voted down.
What can I say to the right honourable gentleman? That the purpose of the announcement today that we will defer the vote and return to this matter is precisely to be able to go and discuss with other European leaders, with the Council and the Commission, those further reassurances that are required by this House in relation to the issue that members of this House are concerned about, notably whether or not the backstop, should it ever be used, can be brought to an end, and that is exactly what we will be doing.
Dame Caroline Spellman.
I should encourage my right honourable friend to ignore the mockery of the opposition. I'd always prefer a Prime Minister who will listen. Has she also heard our West Midlands manufacturers' concern that leaving with no deal would cause unnecessary economic damage, and the best way to avoid this is to leave with a deal?
Yes, can I say to my right honourable friend, we did indeed listen to manufacturers in the West Midlands and up and down the country as we were putting this deal together, and that has underpinned that desire to protect people's jobs and livelihoods while respecting and delivering on the result of the referendum has underpinned the deal that we have, and the deal that this deal does exactly that.
Mr. Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister challenged others to be upfront about what they want. But she needs to be upfront too. That it was her red lines that created the problem of the border in Northern Ireland that led to the backstop, that has brought her to the House of Commons today in such a weak position. Given the answer she gave a moment ago, can she tell the House whether a single of the EU leaders that she spoke to over the weekend indicated that they were prepared to renegotiate Article 20 of the backstop protocol? Because in the absence of any such commitment, isn't cancelling tomorrow's vote merely postponing the inevitable?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the issue that we were very clear on with the European Union in relation to the Northern Ireland border was that there could not be a customs border down the Irish Sea. In February, their proposals were that exactly that should happen. By October, we had persuaded them to enable a UK-wide customs territory to be in the protocol rather than a Northern Ireland-wide customs territory. That was the key issue in relation to the border that we had set as something that was unacceptable to the United Kingdom, and we negotiated that out of the proposal.
Dominic Grieve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I entirely share my right honourable friend's concern about the maintenance of the Belfast Agreement, the peace process in Northern Ireland, and an open border. But is not the reality of what has happened that this Brexit that is being negotiated highlights with total starkness that far from recovering sovereignty has been proclaimed, we are in fact about to part with it, replacing a bilateral agreement with the Irish government, sustained by referendums on both sides of the border, with an arrangement on which no one has been consulted and ruthlessly undermines our sovereign rights. In those circumstances, and mindful of the fact that my right honourable friend faces many difficulties here which are not of her making, surely we should go back to the public and ask them if that is what they want, and offer them the alternative of remaining in the EU.
I say to my right honourable and learned friend, this question, I think every member of this House who has raised this issue of going back to the public on this matter needs to consider very carefully the impact that that would have. I believe it would lead to a significant loss of faith in our democracy. I believe it would lead many people to question the role of this House and the role of members within this House. We gave people the decision. The people decided we should deliver on it.
Yvette Cooper.
Nothing has changed in the level of parliamentary concern about her deal since last week. But the Prime Minister has still sent her ministers out this morning, her official spokesperson out at 11 this morning, to say this vote was 100% going ahead. And yet we still, even now, don't even know when she wants to bring this vote back, or even what she wants the deal to be. Does she not realise how chaotic and ridiculous this makes our country look? And given the importance of trust and credibility in this entire process, how can she possibly talk about duty and honour and faith in politicians when we cannot even trust the most basic things her ministers are saying?
No, I should be clear with the Right Honourable Lady and with the House that I consulted the Cabinet late morning about the decision to defer the vote. That decision was taken because of an understanding of a concern that members of this House have expressed in relation to the backstop, having discussed with members of the House whether the reassurances that had previously been negotiated by the UK Government were sufficient to allay those concerns. It is that issue that we will be going back to the European Union on, and it is that issue on which we will be seeking those further reassurances. But I say once again, this House has a responsibility, and there will come a point where it will be up to every member of this House to determine whether they are going to accept the result of the referendum and deliver a deal for the British people that ensures a smooth exit from Brexit and that protects jobs and livelihoods.
Mr. Damon Green.
Mr. Speaker, as one of the 164 members you referred to, Mr. Speaker, who have already spoken in this debate, can I assure the Prime Minister that I think it's more important that we end up with the right deal for this country, and what's most important for Parliament is that Parliament is seen to take its responsibility and, if possible, agree a deal. Given that, as she rightly identifies, the Irish backstop has been the one element that has discouraged very many people from across the House from supporting this deal, can she give the House some update from her conversations with European leaders over the last few days as to whether progress is possible on that, and therefore can she give us some assurance that Parliament will be able to fulfil its responsibilities and agree a deal?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for his comment, and of course all those members who have already spoken in the debate. Their contributions continue to be an important contribution to the debate on this subject. And I can give my right honourable friend the assurance that, having spoken to European leaders, they are open to discussions with us on this particular issue, and I am confident that we will be able to see some further changes. Of course, that will be the matter for further negotiations.
Mr. Dennis Skinner.
Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that she's handed over power not to people in this House, but she's handed over power to the people that she's going to negotiate with over there in Europe? She looks very weak, and she is. The power that they want is to be able to demonstrate to every other country that might be thinking about getting out of the EU She's handed over them the power to be able to demonstrate that that's what Britain is doing. The British Prime Minister now doesn't know whether she's on this earth or Fuller's because of the action she's taken. Mrs. Thatcher had a word for it. What she's done today, F-R-I-T, she's frit.
And I have every confidence that if I had not listened to members of this House, the honourable gentleman would have stood up and said that I was incapable of listening to members of this House and complained about that.
Davis!
Control of the timing of the backstop by the European Union hands enormous amounts of negotiating power to the other side in this negotiation. Without change, it jeopardises the control of our money, our borders, our regulatory independence, and yes, our constitution too. So it must be time-limited under our control, and that must be legally enforceable. Is that what she is seeking?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that the issue of the length of time that the backstop could or should be in place if it is ever used, and once again it is the intention of neither side that it be used, is a matter which is already addressed in the withdrawal agreement. But people here are concerned at the extent to which they can trust that those assurances within the withdrawal agreement, and that is why it is important to go back and to get those further reassurances.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has changed her mind about the vote, and she's changed her mind about whether or not the backstop can be amended. So if she can change her mind, why won't she just check whether the British people have changed their minds since they voted 2 years ago?
Can I say to the honourable lady, does she honestly think that if we were to have a further referendum and it came out with a different result, people wouldn't then say we should have a third referendum to find out exactly what the result was? This is not. And I say to the honourable lady, I also wonder whether if we had a second referendum and it came out with the same result, she would still be asking for a third referendum about this. This Parliament gave people the choice. The people decided, they voted, we should deliver on it.
Dame Cheryl Gillan.
Mr. Speaker, far from being frit, I think this Prime Minister has great courage in coming back to face this House, delay the vote in efforts to get the best possible deal for this country. And quite frankly, people that voted in the referendum did so sometimes for the first time, and they decided to accept the result no matter on which side they voted. Surely we should not be letting them down, because they will see little point in exercising their vote again if the result is not honoured and we call a second referendum.
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I think she is absolutely right. I think those people, many of whom voted for the first time at all or for the first time in decades when they voted in the referendum in 2016, will indeed question that, why should we vote in future if this Parliament does not deliver on that vote? And as my right honourable friend says, people across the country, whether they voted Leave or Remain, are saying, this was the result, let's just get on with it, let's deliver it.
Leslie.
In the light of this morning's European Court judgment pursued by the honourable members for Edinburgh South West, Carshalton and Wallington, and myself, which clarified that all options are available for our country, can I make the Prime Minister a sincere offer in the hope that she will at least keep her options open? If she takes her Brexit proposal back to the British public for a final say, and also allows the public the chance to stay in the European Union, she can be assured of significant support from many on these benches.
I say, I appreciate the sincerity with which the right honourable gentleman has put his question and made his point. But I do genuinely feel absolutely that it is important for this House to deliver on the vote that took place in 2016.
The Prime Minister has just rather generously, but I fear erroneously, elevated the honourable gentleman to the Privy Council. But I fear it's probably not a bankable assurance, but you never know. Anna Soubry.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, you will recall how a number of us on these benches urged you, indeed begged you, to reach out across these benches, across this House and indeed across our country and find a compromise and a consensus before you laid down your red lines and before you began your negotiations. After 3 days of debating and given the statement of the Commission this lunchtime, it's clear that nothing has changed and nothing will change. But the thing that is changing is the view of the British people.
No, it's not. It's not.
I know it's nearly the pantomime season, but oh yes, it has. And that is why, honourable...
Order! The Right Honourable Lady is giving eloquent and full expression to her views, which is not entirely unknown, but the Right Honourable Lady must be heard, and she will be heard. I'm not having any member of this House shouted down. That is not acceptable, and it will not happen. Amen. Anna Soubry.
That is why, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for Sunderland and the Honourable Member for Redcar, two of the highest voting Leave areas, are now supporting a people's vote, and rightly so, because their constituents are entitled to change their mind, and young people are entitled to have a say about their future, because at the end of the day, they will bear the burden of Brexit. I would urge the Prime Minister, we have found an impasse in this House. It's time now to take this back to the people and have a people's vote.
The United Kingdom does not have a long tradition of holding referendums. We have held, there was a Scottish referendum, there was a referendum back in 1975 on joining the European Economic Community, there was a referendum in 2016 on whether or not to leave the European Union. In all of those votes, the government has taken a very clear view that the result of those referenda should be respected. And I believe this referendum should be respected as well.
Savile Roberts.
People outside these walls see a shambles of a government, and with this in mind, we will therefore support the Leader of the Opposition should he, as he should, table a motion of no confidence. And as of this morning, European's Court of Justice ruling, it's within the Prime Minister's gift personally to take no deal off the table. Will she today rule out the threat of no deal and, should it prove necessary, be prepared to revoke Article 50?
The result of the European Court of Justice determination is clearly they've determined it is possible to unilaterally revoke Article 50. But the point that they have made is that nobody should think that revoking Article 50 is a short-term solution or a short-term extension of Article 50. Revoking Article 50 would mean going back on the vote of the referendum and staying in the European Union.
Sir Oliver Heald.
When I spoke in the debate, I made it clear that I was supporting the Prime Minister, but I did have concerns about the backstop and its indefinite nature. Does she agree with me that given that the EU have already recognised that this is a temporary arrangement, given that our Attorney General has already said it would not be forever and there are means of challenging it legally, it would be helpful if our European partners could give more clarity about how long it would take for us to leave the backstop in the event that the talks break down?
I think my right honourable and learned friend is absolutely right The European Union has already indicated that the backstop is temporary in its nature, and therefore I think it's entirely reasonable to ask them to give that further clarification about that temporary aspect of the backstop and the ability to bring the backstop to an end.
In my 27 years in this House, I have rarely seen a government in such a farrago of chaos as the Prime Minister has caused with her negotiations. Last week, she said, and I quote, "I caution honourable members that not only has the EU made it clear that the withdrawal agreement cannot be reopened, we have agreed the deal and the deal is there." She's now abandoned the vote and has come back to this House telling us that somehow the unopenable deal is open again, or she's seeking assurances it won't be worth the paper they're written on because she's done her legal deal already. Why on earth doesn't she just abandon this dancing on the head of a pin and let us vote on this appalling deal?
We have negotiated a deal in its two parts with the European Union of the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration on our future relationship. There is one aspect of that withdrawal agreement which has raised particular concerns. That aspect of the withdrawal agreement is already dealt with in the withdrawal agreement through various assurances about the temporary nature of the backstop. Those assurances in discussions with colleagues, it's clear those assurances are not sufficient, and we therefore go back to seek further reassurance on the nature of that temporary aspect of the backstop.
John Redwood. Many people think that signing away large sums of money would badly undermine our negotiating position on the Irish backstop and the future partnership. So will she reassert with the House of Lords findings, we do not owe this money and nothing is agreed until everything is agreed?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I know this is a point that he has pressed before, and I recognise that the House of Lords came out with an opinion in relation to this, but indeed there are other legal opinions in relation to the application of various aspects of international law on the treaty, which says that indeed we do have legal obligations in financial terms, and I believe that as a country we should meet those obligations.
Joanna Cherry.
Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has said that she doesn't want a second vote because it risks dividing the country again. But can I remind her that the United Kingdom is not a country, it's a union of 4 nations. And already that union is divided because 2 out of those 4 nations voted to remain. If she can, she's conceded this afternoon that she can't get this House to support her deal. So if she really believes in the deal, why won't she have the courage of her convictions and put that deal to the 4 nations of the UK and give them a choice between her deal or remaining in the European Union, as the Court of Justice has said this morning is possible? Why not put it back to the people, Prime Minister?
I can recognise why somebody representing the SNP might have a desire to try to change the result of a referendum when it has taken place. But I would say to the honourable lady, that I have answered the question in relation to going back to the people on a number of occasions this afternoon and on other occasions. I have not been lax in coming to this House and standing up in this chamber and answering questions on this matter. And can I also just point out to the honourable lady, we entered the European Economic Community as one United Kingdom and we will be leaving as one United Kingdom.
Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I think leaving without a deal will be incredibly bad news for this country, not least the manufacturing businesses across the Midlands. Can she confirm that the only way that happens is if people refuse the deal which is on offer? We do leave on the 29th of March.
Yeah, I hope so.
Right honourable friend is absolutely right. The only way to ensure that there is no deal is to have a deal. And the deal on the table is a good deal for the UK, and we will be leaving on the 29th of March next year.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has said that she's going back for more reassurances on the backstop. Does she accept that those reassurances, no matter how strong, will not be legal? And would she not think that she would be better able to negotiate if the EU knew that this House had overwhelmingly voted against the deal?
Yeah.
I think the fact that I have indicated that it is necessary to go back has sent a clear message to the European Union about the importance of engaging on this particular issue and ensuring that there are the level of assurance that is required by members of this House, that is sufficient for members of this House to believe that they can have the confidence that the backstop is not indefinite. It's that potential indefinite nature of the backstop, should it come into place, that has been raising concerns about for members of this House, and I believe it is that we should be addressing particularly.
Ben Patterson.
On the 7th of March, President Tusk offered the UK a wide-ranging free trade agreement which founded on the issue of the Northern Ireland border. It's therefore exasperating, Mr. Speaker, today that the Prime Minister is still talking about the backstop as the only solution to this border. She's heard from the Right Honourable Member for Belfast North. This is a breach of the Belfast Agreement Principle of Consent. It's even a breach of the Articles of the Act of Union 1801. Since then, she has met international customs experts. She's met a Nobel Prize winner, Right Honourable Lord Trimble. She knows that existing techniques and existing custom procedures can continue to deliver a seamless border. Will she please, at this late stage, put the backstop and all its horrors behind her, go back to the European Union and take up the offer made by President Tusk using these modern, seamless customs techniques?
Can I perhaps just say to my right honourable friend that the offer that the European Union put to the United Kingdom was for a Canada-style free trade agreement for Great Britain, because in order to deal with the seamless border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, they wanted to separate Northern Ireland away from the customs territory of Great Britain and therefore not have a single UK customs territory. And in relation to the technical issues, the technical solutions that my right honourable friend refers to, yes indeed, and we have continued to engage with those who put these forward. The question is not just about no physical infrastructure on the border. The question is about the extent to which people on both sides of the border are able to continue to lead their lives as they do today, with no increased barriers or encumbrances to their leading their lives in that way. And that is what I believe delivers on the seamless border, which does indeed underpin the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Ben Bradshaw.
She said in her statement that this is the best deal and the only deal, and it is time for all of us in this place to face up to our responsibilities. We're ready to do that, Prime Minister, so put this deal to a vote in this House, and if she's not prepared to that, put it to a vote of the people.
That we are deferring the vote. We will seek these further. We will seek these further reassurances. And on the issue of the vote to the people, the right honourable gentleman has heard my answer to that question several times already this afternoon.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
The exit date of 29th of March won't be put off as well.
I say, we have actually put it into legislation, and this government is committed to delivering exiting on the 29th of March.
Emma Reynolds.
Minister be clear that she is seeking an exchange of letters of reassurance with the EU, not a change to the text of the withdrawal agreement. She just said that.
I have said earlier that nothing's off the table, that what we're looking at, actually there are a range of ways in which I believe we can find the assurances for members of this House. The task is to find sufficient reassurance that gives the confidence to members of this House that the backstop will not be indefinite.
Andrew Bridgen.
Successful renegotiations require trust and credibility. Given the Prime Minister's breathtaking U-turn today, I put it to her that she's lost the trust and credibility of the House, lost the trust and credibility of the country, and most importantly, she's lost the trust and credibility of the European Union.
To say to my honourable friend, no, that was what was very clear in my discussions with European leaders, is that we will be able to have discussions with them, myself and the UK government, on this issue.
Liz Kendall.
The Prime Minister told MPs to be honest about the options we face. But she has never spelt out to her backbenchers or the public that any type of Brexit deal has always been a choice between damaging our economy and having a hard border in Northern Ireland or ending up as a rule taker. Isn't it this failure that's led to this crisis? Absolutely. And she only has herself to blame.
No, I say to the Honourable Lady, we have been clear about the need for this, what we believe is right for the United Kingdom, which is to negotiate a bespoke deal, which does not be either the sort of Norway EEA option, which is at one end of the spectrum that the European Union offered in the first place, or the Canada-style deal for Great Britain with Northern Ireland carved out in a separate customs territory, which is at the other end of the spectrum the EU proposed. And the political declaration does indeed include a trade agreement with a free trade area at its heart, with no tariffs, no quantitative restrictions, and with ambitious proposals in relation to the customs border.
Mrs. Theresa Villiers.
Will be well aware that the backstop was just one of a number of very grave concerns backbenchers have about the draft withdrawal agreement. So can she assure the House that she will seek to reduce, for example, the role of the European Court of Justice and change the text of the withdrawal agreement accordingly?
Perhaps I hope I can give some further reassurance to my right honourable friend, because in discussions with a number of colleagues there seems to be a misunderstanding about the role of the European Court of Justice. What we will have in our future relationship is we will end the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. The European Court of Justice will not be the final arbiter of the withdrawal agreement. There has been, I think, some misunderstanding of the reference in the withdrawal agreement to the point that the arbitration panel that is dealing with disputes will be able to ask the European Court of Justice for its opinion on its interpretation of EU law, but the dispute would be determined by the arbitration panel and not by the European Court of Justice.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister may not know, but I've been in this House nearly 40 years, and if I'd made my speech later today, I would have told her that my duty, my sacred duty as a Member of Parliament, is to come here and look after the health, welfare and future prosperity of my constituents, overriding everything else. I have been sympathetic to the situation she finds herself in, but I have lost that sympathy because what I understand now from today's decision is that she is actually being captured by the far right Brexit wing of her party, the so-called European Research Group that doesn't believe in research. She is a captive of this unpleasant nationalist populist group in the Conservative Party.
No, the concern about the potential indefinite nature of the backstop is one that has been expressed by a wide range of members of Parliament, including some on the opposition benches.
Sir Oliver Letwin.
I very much hope, for the sake of this country, that the Prime Minister will prevail in the difficult negotiations that lie ahead. But I hope that as she enters those negotiations, she will be sustained by the widespread admiration, not just on these benches, not just amongst Conservatives, but in the country as a whole, for the dignity and the perseverance she has shown.
I think my best answer to my right honourable friend is to say thank you, and I will be.
Jess Phillips.
Yay! Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Getting worried for my knees, Mr. Speaker. I want to ask the Prime Minister if she thinks that going back and changing minutiae about the backstop is actually going to make any difference to the kind of people on her side who like to go around calling themselves Aslan and circling around her head, caring nothing about this country, but only about their own position.
Exactly.
This backstop rejig, can kicking, is going to make absolutely no difference to those people, and they know it. So what's the plan then?
I say to the Honourable Lady, the issue of the potential indefinite, what people are concerned about is a potential indefinite nature of the backstop. There is no intention for that to be indefinite. There is no intention for it to be used in the first place. That is a genuine concern that is held by people across this House, and I think entirely right that the government addresses it.
Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister rightly talks about listening to young people and first-time voters. Would she accept that they voted overwhelmingly to remain? And they look at what's happening in this House and they see that this deal is Brexit, warts and all. This is as good as it gets. And isn't it time, now that we know what Brexit actually looks like, as opposed to some fantasy version of Brexit, that those people get the chance to actually vote on Brexit reality rather than Brexit fantasy?
I think my honourable friend has heard my response in relation to a people's vote, a second referendum, before. I genuinely believe that we should recognise that the referendum in 2016 was the biggest exercise in democracy in our history. And we should respect those many people who went out to vote, including many who had not voted before. And I believe that if we then go back to people and say, have another think again, actually they will question the value of that democracy and the value of the vote.
I'm quite happy to... Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a political challenge for the Prime Minister, not a substantive one. And it seems that the Prime Minister's strategy is now to try and placate further the ERG wing of her own party. But isn't the truth that they are insatiable? They will not ever be satisfied. So given that the parliamentary maths of this are now so difficult, to really break this deadlock, I believe, requires different parliamentary maths and a general election.
Can I say to the Honourable Lady that I think what this country requires is us to continue to work to get a good deal over the line so we can deliver on Brexit, deliver it in a way that honours the referendum, protects jobs and livelihoods across this country. Further uncertainty and division in this country will do nothing to help people who are looking to their futures.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Essential to any successful negotiator is the ability to walk away. The backstop takes that from us. How can she change that?
I say to my right honourable friend that we are continuing, first of all, that we're continuing on the no-deal preparations, and the Cabinet, as I said earlier, will be meeting to discuss those further. Secondly, that in any circumstance, we need to ensure that there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's finding the ways that we can do that in a way that does indeed enable us to be free in a future relationship, which is the best possible deal for this country that we are looking for and striving to achieve.
Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister talks about faith in democracy, but I think a lot of people, whether they voted Leave or Remain, looking at this shambles today, will see a Prime Minister who's tried to keep economic advice from this House and from the public, has tried to keep legal advice from this House and the public, and a government that's been found in contempt. She's trying to prevent us having a vote on her own deal, and she's trying to prevent us having a vote on whether or not she should be able to have a vote on that deal or not. People are going to be looking at this aghast, and I've spoken to many Leave voters in my constituency. I deeply respect and understand the reasons why they voted Leave in 2016, but many of them have changed their mind. And they're looking at this, they're saying to me that they want a chance to have a say on what is before them, Brexit reality, not Brexit fantasy, and that is why we need a people's vote.
I say to the honourable gentleman, he is wrong, of course, because we did provide economic analysis for this House. We published economic analysis, we published the legal position in relation to the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration that has been available for members of this House. And he talks about the vote as if there is no vote in the future. Of course, we are deferring the vote while we have these further discussions with the EU.
Mrs. Anne Main.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister cannot fail to notice that there are plenty of challenges, legal challenges, surrounding Brexit, whether or not it was the fact that the referendum was legally binding, whether or not we could take Article 50 off the table. So My concern is that any reassurances or assurances given will only be subject to legal challenges down the road if they are not legally binding. Therefore, assurances and reassurances will not make a difference to how I feel about the flaws in this particular withdrawal.
No, can I say to the Honourable Lady, I entirely recognise the point that she is making about legal position in relation to any assurances that are achieved. Obviously, we are at the beginning of the discussions with the European Union on this matter, but what I want to ensure is that members like my honourable friend are able to have the confidence in those assurances when they come back from the European Union.
Mr. David Lammy.
There is no one currently in the House who has been Prime Minister. Does she appreciate that other Prime Ministers under pressure did not delay their legislation? Margaret Thatcher didn't delay after poll tax. Tony Blair didn't delay the Iraq War decision. John Major didn't delay Maastricht. Prime Minister, she knows that when the politics of this place is broken, you either resign, you go back to the people in a general election or a referendum. No one gets to play for extra time before the game is over.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the whole premise of his question, I think, was wrong, and I think if he looks back in the history of this of governments in this country, he will see that.
Greg Hands.
The Prime Minister in her statement said that the government will step up its work in preparation for a possible no-deal outcome. And this is very important. She said the same last month, so I'm wondering if my right honourable friend could tell us at least one action that is now taking place that wasn't taking place last month.
Yes, I'm very happy to say to my right honourable friend, we have indeed been stepping up the action that's been taken. So since I said that, HMRC has taken action in writing out to over 140,000 businesses, and indeed the Department for Health and Social Care has written out to pharmaceutical companies, for example, on the potential impact on no deal on medicines and devices.
Pat McFadden.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has come to the House to talk to us about honesty on the day when she's trying to pull a vote, which she said would not be pulled, in order to try to change a deal she said could not be changed.
Ridiculous.
Isn't it time to be honest about the commitments this country has made to no hard border, to the Good Friday Agreement, and to not doing huge damage to our economy, and the fact that any deal, she can talk to the European Union about the backstop all day, but any deal that respects those commitments will require us to sign up to a set of common European rules over which we will no longer have any say by dint of the fact of Brexit. So isn't it time to be honest both with her backbenchers and with the public about this, instead of trying to square unsquareable circles, or even worse, hide the facts of this fundamental choice until after we're out?
We are committed to no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We are committed to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We are committed to a deal which actually delivers on the protection of people's jobs and livelihoods. That is the deal that we have negotiated. The right honourable gentleman refers to the issue of how one can operate on a trading basis with the European Union in relation to rules that the European Union set. Of course, what the government set out was a proposal, and this is reflected in the balance identified in the political declaration, that if you want to restrict, or if you want to reduce, if you want to remove customs checks, then it is necessary to make commitments in relation to the obligations that you're willing to sign up to. What we proposed in the proposal the government put forward in the summer was to do just that, but to ensure that Parliament had a lock on those votes. But of course there would be a consequence, and we were honest that there would be a consequence if Parliament chose not to accept those rules. That is being open with people about the consequences of their decisions.
Justine Greening.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's not yet confirmed when the meaningful vote will actually be held. My understanding from the House of Commons Library is that now the government has made a statement, as she has today, that the political agreement on the withdrawal agreement and future framework
has been reached, the requirements now for the government to make a statement to the House by the 21st of January on no deal has been superseded because of her statement being made today. And in their view then, in practice, the latest date we could have a meaningful vote would then be the 28th of March. Can I ask her whether this is what she intends, and get some assurances that the delay she's talking about is a matter of days, not weeks and months?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I do not believe the scenario that she has set out is the correct one. There is the 21st of January date, of course, has been set in legislation. There was a vote which referred to that earlier, which took place last week. So we are conscious of the requirements that places on the government. But I believe it is right that we should be recognising concerns that have been expressed in this House and attempting to find a way through those concerns and to resolve those concerns.
Seema Malhotra.
Mr. Speaker, could the Prime Minister confirm reports that over £100,000 has been shelled out by the government on Facebook ads in the last week, promoting the Prime Minister's deal that even she is not now happy with? Isn't this now an even bigger farce, that with uncertainty around UK business access to EU trade arrangements and many other issues, that she seeks to sideline Parliament once again, make social media companies richer, while the country pays the price?
Prime Minister!
The Honourable Lady, no. What we have done is recognise that there is a specific aspect of the deal which is raising concerns here in this House. We will seek reassurances in relation to that specific aspect of the deal. I continue to believe that overall this deal is the right deal for the United Kingdom.
Conor Burns.
The Prime Minister has been consistent since she assumed the premiership that a bad deal will be worse than no deal. And we have had the time since June 2016 to do the preparations for us leaving on WTO terms. Yet frontbench ministers consistently refer to the eventuality of leaving without her deal as chaos. Are our preparations really so woeful?
Can I say to my honourable friend, we have indeed been making those preparations, and we continue to make those preparations, and as I indicated earlier, have been stepping up those preparations. But in relation to the impact of no deal, can I say to my honourable friend, it isn't just a question of what we do in the United Kingdom. What happens at the border depends on others, as well as what preparations we make in the UK. And we cannot determine what action others will take. So there will be a consequence of leaving with no deal, particularly if that is sort of going out without it on a sense of ill will between us and the European Union, with no decisions that have helped to mitigate that impact of no deal. So it isn't just about what we do here, it is about what others do as well.
Steve McCabe.
If the only thing the Prime Minister has heard is that a few tweaks to the backstop arrangement will do the trick, isn't it obvious that once again she's just not listening hard enough?
Prime Minister.
As I've said earlier, I recognise that the issue that has been raised about the backstop is a genuine concern for many members across this House. That is why I believe it's right that we address it.
Crispin Blunt.
On Friday, the Treasury confirmed to me that this House has approved £4.2 billion worth of planning for no withdrawal agreement, and that in terms, stability in a no-deal scenario partly depends on the EU taking a similar non-disruptive approach to planning. With the economic prosperity of one of its members, the Republic of Ireland, very closely engaged, and with £39 billion at stake, and the interests of all the EU businesses that sell twice as much to us as we sell to them, why on earth would they not be planning with us a non-disruptive move to the certainty of World Trade Organization terms and the certainty of control over our economy and our ability to make future trade arrangements?
Prime Minister!
My right honourable friend asks why on earth wouldn't they? The fact is that the European Union has been making some of its own preparations for no deal. It has sent certain notices out in relation to certain matters, but it has not been engaging with us on the aspect of determining or mitigating the impact of no deal on both sides of the border.
Anna Bardell.
I ask this on behalf of the many Livingston constituents of mine that have been in touch, and I'm sure many people across the UK. What the heck is going on? This is a complete and utter cluster-boorer. Why is she more concerned with her own self-preservation and narrow party unity than the lives and livelihoods of my Livingston constituents? How dare she postpone this vote just because she was going to lose? Downing Street and her team have spent the last few days saying the vote was happening. How can anybody in this House, or indeed anybody in the countries of the United Kingdom, ever trust a single word that she or her government speaks ever again?
Prime Minister!
I'll tell the Honourable Lady what's going on. What's going on is this government was working to ensure that this Parliament, that we can get over the line through this Parliament a deal that is good for the whole of the United Kingdom.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Going back to what you said at the beginning of the statement, we had a very detailed business of the House motion passed. It even specified how many hours and on what days and when the vote would be. Ministers were sent out all over the country relating to that debate. Over 100 MPs have spoken already. 140 wanted to speak today. Now, it may well be that the Prime Minister is right, that this House would like to put off the vote. But it needs to be this House that decides that. And, Prime Minister, I don't think so far you've answered the question whether the procedure to be used is a motion of adjourning the House, in which case this House would have a vote, or whether it's just going to be by one sort of anonymous whip saying tomorrow.
Prime Minister.
Honourable friend, that I believe it is important for the government to be listening to the comments that have come to us in relation to this specific issue and to be responding to those comments. If we want to ensure that we get a deal over the line that is good for the British people, then I believe that is absolutely the responsible approach for this government to take.
Mary Cray.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's negotiating strategy seems to be fail again, fail better, and it is not going to revive her zombie Brexit deal whenever she decides to bring it back to this House. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, it will be voted down. She talks of the will of the people, but the will of the people cannot be undermined by a vote of the people. Isn't that now what she must do?
The Honourable Lady has heard my response to the question of a further vote, a second referendum or a people's vote on this issue. And can I just gently remind members of the opposition that every one of them stood on a manifesto commitment to deliver on the referendum.
Joe Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The problem with the deal goes far beyond the backstop. May I ask my right honourable friend what she intends to do about the fact that the government's own analysis shows that every region of the country is going to be left poorer, and we're going to end up with less say over the rules governing huge swathes of our economy than we have at the moment?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend, that actually what the government's economic analysis shows, that in delivering on the referendum, the deal, none of the proposals actually, this deal does not make us poorer than we are today. What it does, no, read it. What the economic analysis shows is that if you want to honour the referendum, then the best deal for doing that and delivering for jobs and the economy is this deal.
That's not what it says. Mr. Gavin Jones.
I not only respect the result of the referendum, I accept it. The Prime Minister in her statement said that she wants a country that truly works for everybody, a country where nobody is left behind. She's been in government now nearly 8 years, and That, in that time, both the previous coalition government and this government has had a deliberate policy of moving resources from poorer areas, most disadvantaged areas, to some of the most wealthiest areas. It's continuing today in public funding for public health in County Durham, which will see it's been the worst hit anywhere in the country, while leafier parts of the Surrey actually gain. Now, people don't want warm words, Prime Minister. What they want action. The action, irrespective of what happens with Brexit, is in her hands now.
Prime Minister.
To the honourable gentleman that we have been putting more money into our health service. We are going to give the health service the biggest cash boost in its history, and a long-term plan that ensures the sustainability of the health service. And in the 8 years that I have been in government, under both the coalition government and this Conservative government, we have seen 3.3 million jobs being created across our country. That's good for his constituents and good for constituents elsewhere.
John Whittingdale.
My right honourable friend in her statement said that alternative arrangements making use of technology could be put in place which would render the backstop unnecessary. Will she therefore incorporate those arrangements and go back to the European Union and ask for a free trade agreement along the lines that Michel Barnier proposed and said was the only way which could ensure that her red lines weren't breached and which would deliver on what the British people voted for?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that the alternative arrangements are indeed specifically referenced in the withdrawal agreement, and of course what we are looking for, what we have set out in the political declaration and the proposals the government has put forward, is indeed a wide-ranging free trade area. It's just a better one than the one the European Union was proposing to us.
Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, I spoke in good faith on Thursday, one of the 164 members of Parliament who did. I cannot understand why the Prime Minister did not hear before that debate started the concerns that members had about the backstop and other issues. So which part of the shambles that we're in today does she most regret, and when will I be able to vote against her deal, as most of my constituents are asking me to do?
Prime Minister.
To the honourable lady, we will indeed, of course, when we have sought the reassurances from the European Union, be bringing the matter back. But I also say to the honourable lady that I think it was right that we have listened. In negotiating, we listened to concerns that have been raised by members of this House. That's why we negotiated a number of changes to the withdrawal agreement before it was agreed that recognised the temporary nature of the backstop. Those have proved not to satisfy members of this House, and it is on that basis that I will seek further assurances.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
The Prime Minister's grit and determination to get the best deal available is truly remarkable. Does she agree with me that in the event that the European Union fails to give anything meaningful in relation to the backstop to a hard border that we all agree is not necessary and will not happen, it will not have demonstrated a scintilla of the good faith that is referenced in the political declaration?
Well, my honourable has made a very interesting point about the good faith. I believe it is important that both sides move together at this point with that good faith and do negotiate, do recognise, the European Union recognises the need for further reassurance on this matter and does indeed respond to that and respond to that positively.
Dame Louise Ellman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister told the House this afternoon that this is the very best deal that actually is negotiable with the EU. Those were her very words. Yet she now tells us she plans to go back to Brussels to plead with them to help her and get her out of this hole. This isn't a government in control. Surely we should put this issue back to the people to ask if they really want to continue with this perilous journey that will make the UK poorer. To
the honourable lady that we have done, we have a deal agreed with the European Union. There is one aspect of it on which people require further reassurance, and it is that basis we're going back.
Mr. Shailesh
Forefront on the international stage in advocating democracy.